Good afternoon. Very well. How are you?
Oh, God. Well, I've been off on holidays here, you see, and I thought I'd come back and I'd be all calm, and then I come back to this debacle again. On the day our Prime Minister announces that we are, what's he say? I'm going to increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027. I've an ambition to make it more by 2034, by which time I won't be in power, so I don't frankly really give a toss. This is the same man who, hiding behind all that he hides behind, the left-wing rhetoric of the human rights lawyer, is allowing our country, and I don't care if you don't like it, to be invaded on a daily basis. 50,000 migrants. And I just wanted to put something to you to start. We were told just now that since 2018, 150,000 illegal migrants here have come to this country. We've only got 74,000 in the British Army. What would Reform do about this genuinely, day one?
Yeah, and so it's exactly right. That's the quite terrifying and devastating number. The number of people, not just people here illegally, but the ones who actually crossed the channel by small boat, now meaningfully outstrip the number available to the British Army, including in the reserves. And sometimes when you would make a point like that, people claim it's hyperbolic or exaggeration. But now we have confirmation. We have confirmation that there were Iranians who came here illegally, who have now been involved in what was a foiled terror attack that would have been absolutely devastating had our security services not successfully and brilliantly stopped it. So this is a national security emergency, and you use the word invasion. Do you remember when Nigel used that word all those years ago? Do you remember the torrent of abuse that he got? And, you know, he's called it essentially a slow motion D-Day in reverse, which is exactly, I'm afraid, what it is. And it is, you know, this is why the small boats is such an emotive and animating issue for voters, because how on earth a country that spends £57 billion a year already on defence, a significant amount of that on a navy that is pretty darn formidable still, is unable to defend its borders against small boats full of unarmed, mainly men, it's about 90% men, coming from France. The only answer to the reason why is total and absolute political failure. And you are now in, you know, Dominic Cummings gave an interview, and whatever you think of Dominic Cummings, he said something that is absolutely correct. Keir Starmer is now doing he's doing a speed run, I think he used the words, speed run of what Rishi Sunak did. He basically said, this is this big problem, it's a catastrophe, it's, you know, as a national security, all of these things. He said, I'm going to solve it, but I'm not going to leave the CHR. In fact, the UK is the only country not even trying to amend. Absolutely mind-blowing.
And this belief that we should hold on to something that is so many, I mean, I think it's about apologists. I think it's the people who feel that we should still apologise for everything that apparently went on thousands of years ago, that we should inherently, as the British people or the UK, be giving and doing as much as we can. The problem with that is, and I keep bringing back, and I have loads of questions for you from people who have sent them in here, but just very quickly, that we should, you know, give away all this sort of stuff. The truth is, the British economy is skint. The British people are struggling, and I think they are at the end of their tether, which is why I think your party is flying high in the opinion polls, because they're saying, I've done everything right and I'm at the back of the queue and it's not fair. Let me throw some questions at you. Let's say that the Reform forms the next government. Would you use the Navy to turn the boats round? Yes or no?
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, I look forward to the day it'll be one of the first calls. I gave a speech a few months ago where I said it'll be one of the first calls I think that Nigel makes based on what he says, and it'll be to the first Sea Lord of the Navy, giving a clear instruction to ensure that not a single unauthorised vessel trying to get to this country across the Channel makes it to our shores. And look, let's be clear, it'll be a humanitarian mission. We have a formidable Navy, but if you talk to people in the Navy, including senior people whom I speak to, it's crystal clear that operationally they could stop those boats extremely quickly, extremely safely. It's, you know, they do this sort of stuff all of the time. It's not an issue operationally.
So if you did that, if you did that from day one, would you, in the meantime, whilst all of those, you know, leaving the ECHR and all the legal ramifications, would you detain people? Henry Bolden was talking about this for security reasons. Would that be offshore? Would that be somewhere else? Would Reform say, whilst this is going through, whilst we're beating off the ECHR, we're going to stop the boats, but we're going to deal with this influx? Would you detain those people?
Also, there's a couple of things, right? Number one, you have to stop people wanting to pay money to people smugglers and coming here, right? And also, we know nothing about these people, and we know for sure. By the way, do you remember when there was a man crossing the Channel and he was posting live on TikTok.
Yeah.
He posted the French Navy escorting him to the UK. That was a man who had publicly threatened a sitting member of parliament that happens to be our leader in the form of Nigel. Do you remember that? The guy with the tattooed Kalashnikov? And the French Navy were escorting him to the UK. So number one, we've got a team working already on a whole policy agenda, because not only do we need to leave the ECHR, replace it with the British Bill of Rights, we've got to leave judges. You know, you can blame judges all you want and say they're activists, but the reality is you should leave, the politicians should leave no room for a judge, no matter how activist they are, to say that a rapist who is in this country, who's from Kenya, who's a convicted rapist, cannot be deported because he's an alcoholic and he might have a miserable time of it.
Zia, it is music to my... Listen, I know, everybody knows this. I voted Reform. I was a Tory all my life. I was fed up with it. I listened to Mike Graham in the mornings, and he has a migrant of the day. We have sat here for months, my friend, and listened to people who can genuinely use a left-wing human rights lawyer paid for by the British taxpayer say, I can't go to another country because, you know, my child won't like the chicken nuggets. People laugh at me. That's a genuine story. There was a guy... This was about 3 weeks ago. I mean, I'm not going to apologise to you, Buster. He has an illicit... It's a business in the United Kingdom where he imports and exports... Well, it's sex toys, I'm not going to lie. And he couldn't go back to the country he came from because it's not allowed under Sharia law. And I'm sat here thinking, I'm working and sitting on a bleeding train and people are paying taxes. And these left-wing judges and these lawyers are, I think, making a mockery of the British people. You must deal with those lawyers day one.
I agree, but I think that lets these awful politicians off the hook. It's such an easy thing. You know, look, how is the government losing these lawsuits when the government has a pretty cool a cheat code available to it, which is it could change the laws. You know, it's like playing a computer game against somebody and you keep losing, even though you get to control the rules of the game. People vote for politicians. They didn't vote for those judges. So as much as the judges in those cases, I think, have made appalling decisions, we've got our politicians like Nigel, like the Reform MPs that we do have and will have a lot more of in 2029, who say, look, this is the law. What we're going to do is ensure that the rights of British citizens, if you want to talk about human rights, let's put the rights of British citizens, you know, British women to live in countries where they don't have to fear that there are convicted rapists wandering around because they can't be deported because of these insane international treaties that are weaponized against people from this country. Look, this is pretty straightforward stuff. Anyone who tells you that these things are difficult to solve is just being utterly dishonest, and they actually have to tell you it's impossible to solve because the Tories had 14 years and made this problem way worse, and Labour have thrown gasoline on what was already a fast-burning fire. So everyone understands that Nigel has talked about this for decades. It's also why Reform is the only vehicle through which this kind of change can come, because we're going to go from 5 MPs to hopefully well north of 325. I think we can get to 350 to 400 MPs, which will give us the working majority we need. That's also why we can't have a pact and a ragtag coalition with a bunch of wet Tories who are low agency, who presided over these catastrophes that we were talking about in the first place.
Let me stop you there, because I've got lots of questions.
Then we will solve these problems very quickly.
I'm not letting you go because I've got loads of questions, but I'm going to jump in on something you just said. Do you genuinely, and I've made my point, I voted for Reform, and I'm delighted to have you on, and I will ask you the questions that need asking. Do you genuinely believe, from where you are 4 years out with nearly 30%, do you believe that you will survive the undoubted attacks, and Harry Cole was talking this earlier, not just from the Labour Party and the Tory Party, but from the establishment, from the Blob, from the BBC, from everybody? I do, because I think the British people have had enough, and I genuinely, but do you genuinely believe that Reform can have and form the next government with the majority?
Well, the answer to that lies in the hearts and minds of the British voters, and so ultimately that question lies in whether British voters believe that Reform is the answer to the challenges that face the country, whether the multi-decade track record Nigel Farage has on campaigning on these issues and changing the course of history in this country, and also whether they can see through basically vicious, made-up, largely ad hominem attacks that are entirely double standards at best. My answer to that is yes. If there was a general election to be held tomorrow, most of the analysis of the support levels we currently have put us already on north of 350 seats. Now, sadly, we are several years away from the next general election. Are we going to be attacked by everyone? I mean, Keir Starmer just dragged the whole press up north in order to have a press conference to just slag off Nigel, apparently. It obviously backfired very badly. I mean, it was incredibly painful to watch, actually. But look, what I will tell everyone involved with reform, our volunteers, our supporters, and our team, hold on to your hats. We're gonna, we're gonna come into for one hell of a shallacking from our enemies. But yeah, I think we'll see it through. We're all in this because we're mission driven and we want to help turn this great country around.
Loads of questions for you. We announced, the Reform announced today that it's going to send its first Elon Musk style Department of Government Efficiencies DOGE team into local authorities. You won Kent County Council. What do you hope to achieve by doing that?
Well, what we hope to achieve is deliver, as we already start, so many times you vote for a political party who claim they're going to do all sorts of things and then they don't do it. And so what we committed to do as part of our local manifestos is say, look, we are going to bring in teams of extremely talented auditors, engineers, to be able to go in and look at the books and really understand where on earth all of this money is going. We're starting with Kent. They're going to go to all of the councils. They're working as volunteers. They're outstanding. They're very high caliber individuals. And look, if you take Kent, for example, they started with Kent because it's the largest budget, well north of £2 billion per year. The notion that there isn't going to be money that is being wasted on things that taxpayers would be pretty abhorred by, frankly, I think is for the birds. And so look, what we've got to do first is make sure that the data is analysed, and so that's what we're going to do. And
that's all well and good, James.
People are sick and tired of the tax burden going up all the time and money not being spent with any respect. I mean, we ultimately, as Reform, our commitment to the British people is Reform elected representatives will spend your taxpayer money as if it were their own. And I'll tell you already, I can tell you, we're finding road maintenance contracts of 27 years. 27-year road maintenance contract. I mean, even Elon Musk's SpaceX road contracts are
I'm not
27 years.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but James Price made a really important point earlier, and I want to put it to you. It's very difficult locally to cut waste because budgets are set by central government. So you're not going to be able to just go into these. I mean, whether you take, is it Elon Musk you taking to Kent by any chance? Is that why he's resigned from Trump?
Not, he's a UK tech entrepreneur. He's 28. He's awesome. He's very successful, and he's a volunteer, and he's put together a great team.
Can you tell us his name?
Yeah, his name is Nathaniel Fried. He built a company called talkTV, which was seeded by the British government. He sold that company to US private equity. Again, he's motivated by the mission. He is a second-generation immigrant. He is a patriot, and he's got a team of pretty weapons-grade engineers, forensic auditors, etc. And by the way, our inbox has absolutely blown up since we announced all of this stuff, saying we want to help, we want to help. There's so many patriotic people who are so just refreshed that a political party and a bunch of politicians, and we've got a brilliant leader in the form of Lyndon Concaran down there in Kent, who actually want to help turn the council around. I just want to address that point, though, just because, yes, the majority of the budget is statutory. These are services that must be provided. That is true. So number one, what's the answer there? You just hand wave it and you say, yeah, keep raising taxes endlessly on people. Just because a council is compelled to provide a service doesn't mean that you can't look at how contractors who are being paid to provide that service are providing it. So look, if, for example, over the last couple of years, there's been confirmed, and this is not speculative, this is before Reform's time, millions of pounds of confirmed fraud, where, for example, taxi companies involved in taking SEND children to school, invoicing for journeys that never happened. A whole racket that happened around parking passes. So what we need to do is work out where this money is going. For example, there's taxpayer money being spent on paying for asylum seekers to get free driving lessons. Yep. And again, to your point, there's people listening to this right now who are busting a gut, working, setting their alarm clocks dead early in the morning, some of them working 2 jobs, and they are paying for their own driving lessons. And so this is what really grates with people, this huge sense of unfairness. And frankly, I think for too many years now, the incredibly kind, open-hearted, warm-spirited nature of the British people has now been just taken advantage of.
Completely agree with you. But this DOGE task force, I mean, you look at it and you go, great idea, similar to what's happening to Trump. And I've quoted Trump on many occasions. There's many things I don't like about him, but what he's done 1,000,000% is say to the American people, that's what I'm going to do. And he's bloody well gone and done it. I remember saying about a week after the inauguration speech, CNN or some ridiculous channel played a footage of these people at the Mexico border crying. And this woman was going, there's no point in trying. He won't let us in. And I'm going, yes, because that's what he damn well said. So I've got a question. This is from Jeremy Kyle to Zia Yusuf, right? We've talked about local councils, DOGE. I think it's a great idea. Let's talk about the blob. I said this to Tice over a beer, right? There's 10,000 civil servants in Whitehall. I think in all my time of doing this, the thing that caused me to almost fall off my chair was when, and at this point I didn't agree with Rwanda, OK, but a bunch of civil servants in the Home Office used taxpayers' money 2 years ago, 18 months ago, to take a democratically elected government to court because they didn't like a policy that a democratically elected government was trying to get through. And you think to yourself, come on, the blob, these civil servants, too much power. What will Reform genuinely do about the power of the civil service from day one?
Well, that's a huge piece of work that is already underway. I'm not going to claim we already have the answer, but we have brilliant people already working on that. It's going to take time for us to put together, when Nigel wins, which is obviously the goal, we want Nigel to be the Prime Minister, Reform with a meaningful working majority. We want to have not just the policies ready, we want to have the bills ready.
Yep.
We want to be able to put sweeping legislation. I think Nigel's first term will be the most transformative first term of any Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher by some distance, partly because as awful a state as the country was in when she came into Downing Street, it's going to be orders of magnitude more challenging by the time this god-awful Labour government are turfed out.
A couple more from Lucy. Please ask Zia what Reform's plans are for the NHS. I think the social insurance model is a good idea, although I would probably pay as I have savings.
Yeah, look, again, there's a large work stream that's going on as we speak with regards to the NHS. Both my parents worked in the NHS and still do, actually. They're on 50 years of service to it. I've heard firsthand through my mum who's a nurse, my dad who's a doctor, all of the horror stories about how hard it is for frontline clinicians to actually do their jobs. There's not enough medicines, the rotas are not done properly so everyone can get bank pay. There's so many problems inside the NHS, which is why, as much as it's dear to all of our hearts, we have to ask why, compared to a decade ago, the cost per person in terms of the taxpayer has gone up by about 50%, adjusted for inflation, and yet waiting lists have gone up sevenfold. How does that work?
Well, you could answer that by saying that it's almost a micro view of the United Kingdom. Perhaps people are using the NHS who shouldn't be using the NHS and are taking advantage of it.
Over the last decade, well north, like 7.2 million foreign-born people have registered with GPs, and the notion that that is not a meaningful driver why people listening to this struggle to get GP appointments is for the birds.
Absolutely. Matt says, what will Reform do to help with knife crime in the area of Leicester and more importantly across the UK? Because the idiot who runs London's done nothing about knife crime. It's an absolute disgrace. We've talked about should there be stop and search. I think so. I think there should be stronger sentences. You're caught with a knife, you go to prison. I mean, all we hear about, what was it? There was an amnesty from Keir Starmer where if you took a knife, a zombie knife, you get a tenner. You'd imagine being stopped by the police here and going, "That's all right. I'm on my way to the police station to get £10." These knives are ruining people's lives. What would Reform do?
Jerry, I'm going to answer this and I'm going to love you and leave because I've got another media commitment. But I will say the answer to that is absolutely stop and search and probably mandatory minimum sentences for carrying a deadly weapon. And so we all know, look, anyone who claims stop and search doesn't work is utterly dishonest. And the only reason, so you can look at it cross-culturally across the world, whether it's America, where there's a gun problem, or other countries where there are deadly weapons in terms of knives. If you deploy stop and search in a smart, effective way, it puts an end to the problem. But here's the reason why no politician will do it, because they're cowards, because they're worried that they'll be accused of being racist. And what they forget in that when they're faced with such an accusation is that, yes, if you deploy stop and search, people from certain minority groups are often disproportionately stopped by a polite police officer, for about a minute or so. But what they forget to mention is that the blood that soaks the streets as a result of the violence and the murders, as a result of those deadly weapons, is invariably that same ethnic minority. And if you speak to, as I did, a Somali mother who almost lost her son as a result of a machete attack, thankfully he survived. If you listen to her, would she have been okay with her son being stopped by a very polite police officer, Metropolitan Police officer, for a minute or so, in order to reduce the chance that she would have a knock on the door from that same officer delivering the worst news a mother could ever receive? I think we both know the answer to that.
Listen, I really appreciate your time. Sorry to have gone on, but it's fascinating. Zia Yusuf